a very warm welcome to your television Tonga news package for tonight. Making headlines, Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade discuss its trade policy review. Prime Minister Lord Ivano and Tonga's delegation to the Palm Ministerial meeting have arrived in Tokyo, and Tonga National Reserve Bank and Ports Authority pays dividend to government. These and more stories later on in this bulletin. I'm Fatai Whaingaa with your news for tonight. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade comes together with stakeholders to discuss its trade policy review. The acting Prime Minister, Honourable Samia Waipulu, opened the programme this morning with the presence of the acting Secretary of the Ministry, Honourable Whaneta Povava o Tuivakano. Sinilato was there and filed this report.
The acting Secretary of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, in her welcoming speech, says World Trade Organization members are tasked with submitting a trade policy review annually. For Tonga, this is its first trade policy review since it became a member of the World Trade Organization 6 years ago.
The focus of the next 2 days will be on Tonga's trade policy review. However, it marks the start of our efforts to improve coordination and dialogue between the Ministry and its relevant stakeholders in both public and private sectors. While this is a workshop on the WTO, the Ministry sees this as a forum that will set a platform for future discussions on trade, where we can all work together to ensure we attain maximum benefit from trade opportunities.
The acting Prime Minister, Honourable Samia Waipulu, opened the 2-day workshop.
Tonga had never used WTO for its trade. We have had, over the years, been restricted to export. We have been made, over the years, as a market for each and everyone else. We have never used being a member of WTO. When this government came into government 2011, I was told by Mr. Edgar Copper that if we import water, full bottles, it's duty-free. But if a Tongan manufacturers imported empty bottles, it's 15% duty. That's why I said we have been made a market, not an exporter.
The discussions will focus on 2 reports from the WTO Secretariat and Government's report. Discussions will mainly focus on the Government's draft report, on its contents and changes if necessary. Meanwhile, advisors from Geneva are in the Kingdom to help out with their trade policy review. Partaking in the 2-day workshop are representatives from the Ministry's related stakeholders in the government and non-government organizations and private sectors. For Television Tonga News, I'm Sinilato.
The Prime Minister Lord Ivano and Tonga's delegation to the Palm Ministerial meeting have arrived in Tokyo on Wednesday, October 23rd, and was received by Her Excellency Mrs. Tania Tupo, Tonga's resident ambassador to Japan. While the ministerial meeting will be discussing Tonga's proposed hosting of the forthcoming symposium on island countries trade and local agricultural products promotion in 2014. In line with trade and investment, the Tonga delegation had the opportunity to meet with investors from Tonga and Japan, including the Vava'o-based vanilla and the Japanese confectionery company Hon Takasakoya Company Limited. This evening, Thursday, October 24th, 2013 in Japan, the Tongan community in Japan had an opportunity to meet with the Lord Prime Minister and Lady Tuivakano. The Prime Minister is in good health and has carried out meetings with the high-ranking officials together with the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe. The Parliament yesterday did not pass a bill for an act to amend the Act of Constitution of Tonga No. 4, 2013. The House continued with its discussions on both bills until 6 p.m. yesterday, where members of the Committee of the Whole House voted out the bill for an act to amend the Act of Constitution of Tonga, No. 4, 2013, and passed the Bill for Rehabilitation of Offenders 2013. During the ballot in a whole House committee, 6 members voted for the bill, while 12 voted against it. While the bill was taken to Parliament for its second reading, 13 members voted against and 6 of them voted for it. The bill proposed to amend Clause 50A of the Constitution to enable all electors to elect the Prime Minister and shall take place within 2 weeks of their turn of the writ after a general election. The bill also proposed that all 26 representatives of the people and the nobles who have been elected in a general automatically, on the return of the writ, become candidates for the position of the Prime Minister unless disqualified by law. Other amendments were also involved on the contents of the bill. Meanwhile, the Parliament also passed the Rehabilitation of Offenders Bill 2013, with 22 MPs voted for it. At the end of yesterday's Parliament session, the Speaker of the House, Lord Fafanua, told members of the House it's the end of their agenda for the year before closing of Parliament next week. This morning, Chief Clerk of the House, Gloria Poleo, told Radio Tonga News that a date for closing of Parliament is yet to be confirmed. The National Reserve Bank of Tonga yesterday paid 2.7 million pa'anga to government from its net profit for the 2012-2013 financial year. The bank's profit was presented by the Chairman of the Board of Directors of the National Reserve Bank of Tonga, Steve Atwoods, to the Honourable Minister of Finance and National Planning, Honourable Lisete Akolo. In a statement from the bank, it says this is a 38% increase in their profit in comparison to the previous net profit of 1.97 million pa'anga. This is part of the bank's income from its investment in Tonga's foreign exchange reserves. Meanwhile, on Mr. Atwood's capacity as the Chairman of Ports Authority's Board of Director, he presented the board's dividend to the government. The cheque to the tune of 620,000 pa'anga was presented to the Honourable Minister of Public Enterprises, Fe'a Wakata. For the last 5 years, the authority has paid more than 3 million pa'anga to the government. The heads of education systems in the Pacific are working together to recognize the different systems accreditation in every Pacific island. This is to help recognize the teachers' qualification in the region and for them to easily get a job anywhere in the region. This is according to the chair lady of the 20th meeting of the Pacific Heads of Education System, Emily Bovalu.
One of the agenda discussed in the Pacific Heads of Education Systems meeting in Nuku'alofa during the week is the attempt to recognize the teachers' qualifications. The issue was discussed during the Education Ministerial meeting in past years. In an interview with Television Tonga News, the chair lady of the meeting, who is also Tonga's Education and Training Director, Emily Bovalu, says they hope to register all the systems of accreditation.
We have benchmarking issues in the Pacific. We have got 4 different systems of accreditation that are in the whole Pacific region. So it's more to see how we can have a set benchmark for the Pacific Islands only, and to see how relevant all these situations to the Pacific, because we have the North Pacific using an American system, and we've got the South Pacific working either in alignment to Australia, New Zealand, or the South Pacific Board for Educational Assessment.
She adds this is to enable labour mobility. Mrs. Bovalu says they've started working on this issue, which will be discussed in the Education Ministerial meeting next February in the Cook Islands. For Television Tonga News, I'm Sini Lato.
Balai Vahai of Ma'awhanga was this morning ordered to pay a fine of 500 pa'anga and to be paid within a limited period of 2 weeks. This was after the offender pleaded guilty for producing pornographic material, where magistrates in Miloni Tokala ruled that if he failed to pay his fine in a period outlined by court, he will then be serving 5 months in prison. However, due to the taboo within the local community and way of living, details of this case cannot be released. According to Magistrate Tokalau, he has provided counselling to the accused due to the seriousness of the crime committed. Tonga Health yesterday presented a donation of more than 60,000 paanga to 50 groups in Tongatapu and the Outer Islands at the Tonga National Cultural Centre in Tofoa. The assistance will empower the groups in their work to promote healthy lifestyle in the nation. Anasi Falikano reports.
The theme highlighted in this program includes minimizing of the people's smoking habit and to reduce the risk of consuming alcohol. Speaking to Radio and Television Tonga News, the director of Tonga Health, Imai Mahavea, says 21 groups will focus on promoting healthy lifestyles, while the rest focus on planting vegetables to promote healthy diet. According to the information that we had, the setback for people's abilities to carry out physical activities was due to lack of resources. We therefore supply materials and resources needed to be able to expand their life expectancy. Meantime, one successful applicant of Afisi Ihoi of Tangalogilo Group from Matahau says they are very excited to be part of this program. We are trying to promote healthy environment in the community. When we received the opportunity, we were happy knowing that we are doing it to save a life. This is the phase 1 of the projects, where the second phase will be implemented early next year. About 12,000 people will benefit from this program. For Television Tonga News, I'm Manasi Falekaono.
Tonga College students this morning carry out a prayer service seeking God's help during the students' Forms 5, 6 and 7 end of year exams. Anasi Falekano with One Net Story.
This special program is to seek God's help and guidance towards the students' examinations. Speaking to Television Tonga News, the Deputy Chief Executive Officer of Education, Manu Akau-Ola, says a good student must do their best and leave God the rest. A well-educated student must study hard and make sacrifices. Meantime, some of the senior students says they are optimistic of this year's exams. I'm very excited about this year's exams, especially with the parents' support. I am ready and confident to sit this exam, thanking God for His guidance, despite the hard times, but we're all looking forward to reap a better result. The prayer service was led by Reverend Mateake Fihaki. For Television Tonga News, I'm Manasiu Falekaono.
Village and agricultural inspection of the Lulunga group of islands in Hawaii are in full swing, which includes the islands of Hawhewa, Oʻua, Tongua, Matoku, Koto and Fotoha'a. This is according to the District Officer of Lulunga, Sione Taulani, in an interview with Radio and Television Tonga this morning. This program is an initiative of the Police Department, Agriculture and Health Centre of the islands to ensure sufficient food supplies in the islands and to help tackle climate change with a clean environment. We are happy to know that the people are excited to participate in a program, not because they are forced to, but they are willing to take part in this community program for their own benefit. He aids the islands obtain fertile soil but needs to be cultivated. The truth is, land in these islands are available and are fertile to be cultivated because there are insufficient supplies of food. This is due to the people's dependency on others and not on themselves. This inspection program will end on November 5th. Ofake Moliva Enuko of Tofoa was this morning sentenced to a bail of good behaviour within the next 9 months after pleaded guilty for assault. At the magistrate court, the prosecutor says that Ofa slapped his stepdaughter, whom is the complainant, because she had moved from the Tokaikola Church to the Mo'oia Kalaisi Church. The accused explained to court that the complainant was talking back to his wife, causing her punishment. The complainant has moved in with her grandparents. That's the local news. Sport is up next with Sinilato.